Stop scrolling, because what you're about to hear sounds like something out of a movie. But it unfolded inside a congressional hearing, a small black recorder, a voice filling the room, and then complete silence. Not just any silence. 67 seconds where no one spoke, no one moved, and one of the most powerful officials in the country couldn't explain what had just been played. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this moment has people asking serious questions. During a House Judiciary hearing, Thomas Massie did something no one expected. He didn't start with a question. He pressed play. And according to what was presented in that moment, the voice heard in the room was identified as Pam Bondi, saying a line that immediately changed the tone of the hearing, a reference to an $847,000 transfer, and the statement that it should not be put in writing elsewhere. Now pause here, because whether you believe the claim or not, that kind of statement raises immediate red flags, and what happened next made it even more intense. Instead of reacting emotionally, Massie calmly followed up with a document, a bank wire transfer receipt shown on the record, reportedly bearing Bondi's authorization. Not a staff signature, not a department stamp. Her name, her signature. The claim, $847,000 in public funds transferred to a company with no visible employees, no clear address, and no publicly documented services. Now think about that. If true, that's not just a bureaucratic question, that's a serious issue. But here's where the tension really builds, so stay with me. When asked directly to explain the purpose of that payment, there was no immediate answer. Instead, the focus shifted to whether the recording itself could be authenticated. And that's an important detail, because in hearings like this, evidence isn't just about what's shown, it's about what can be proven. But Massie didn't stop there. He introduced another document, an internal memo reportedly classifying related records under attorney-client privilege, effectively shielding them from public disclosure. And this is where things start to get complicated, because attorney-client privilege exists for a reason. But when applied to government actions, it raises a critical question. Who exactly is the client? The public, the department, or someone else entirely? Now here comes the part that made the room shift again. A third document was presented, an internal communication suggesting that a financial analyst had flagged the transaction as potentially suspicious, something that would normally trigger a formal report. But according to the claim, that report was never filed. Instead, the instruction allegedly came back, "Do not proceed, the matter is classified." Now pause again, because this is where the story moves from confusing to potentially serious. If a transaction is flagged and then suppressed, that becomes a much bigger issue than the transaction itself. And at this point in the hearing, the dynamic had completely changed. This was no longer routine oversight. It had become something everyone in the room was watching closely. Even members who had been disengaged earlier were now paying attention. And then came one of the most powerful moments, not from Massie, but from another member of the same party, who simply asked for clarification. No speech, no accusation, just a request to confirm whether the document shown was accurate, and the response? Silence. That silence, more than anything else, became the moment people focused on, because sometimes in these situations, what isn't said carries more weight than what is. Now stay with me, because this next part connects everything together. A privilege log was introduced, essentially a list of documents being withheld, and according to what was presented, dozens of entries were tied to a single matter reference. That alone raised questions. Why would so many documents be tied to one issue? And then came a reference that shifted the context even further, an apparent connection to Jeffrey Epstein-related matters. Now it's important to be careful here, because references and confirmed facts are not the same thing. But the mention alone changed how people interpreted everything that came before it. At this point, legal counsel stepped in, invoking executive privilege to limit further questioning. And this is where things enter a grey area, because executive privilege can protect certain communications, but it doesn't automatically apply to every situation. That tension between oversight and privilege is something that has existed for decades in US politics, but in this moment it felt immediate, personal, and unresolved. Then came the final question. Direct, specific, and impossible to misinterpret. Was the transfer authorized under instruction from higher within the executive branch, and was it connected to the resolution of ongoing investigations? A clear question. And the response, again, was a refusal to answer on legal advice. And just like that, the hearing reached its peak. not with shouting, not with dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet refusal that left more questions than answers. And here's the bigger picture you need to think about. In situations like this, there are always layers: what is claimed, what is proven, and what remains unclear. This video isn't about telling you what to believe. It's about showing you what was presented, what was asked, and what was left unanswered. Because accountability doesn't just come from answers, it also comes from the questions that don't get answered. And now the real question is this: what happens next? Because if documents have been entered into the record, if claims have been made publicly, then eventually those claims are tested, through investigations, through legal processes, through time. And that's where the real story continues. So as you think about everything you've just heard, ask yourself one thing. In a situation like this, what matters more? The evidence shown or the answers given? Because sometimes the silence is the loudest part of all.